basically I went from being great at my job to not being able to do my job at all. And your plan is going to be wrong, your change is going to be wrong, and you need to test and learn your way through it. So understanding the outcome and what is the level of autonomy the team has right now, and what's the path to greater autonomy. If you're organized for yesterday's outcomes, then the outcome is going to diffuse across a whole bunch of teams. Those aren't the teams doing the work anymore. The teams doing the work are this other shadow entity that's operating. The funniest one is don't do an agile transformation.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Untrapping Product Team. Today we have Jeff Anderson, who is the president of Agile by Design and also the book author of Organizing Toward Agility and the Lean Change Method. Jeff, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me, David. Love to be here. It's great.
Cool. Yeah, and today we're going to do a little bit of spontaneous podcast. We're going to explore a very interesting story that I heard from you, which is you transformed a huge adversity into something great. And I want to hear this story from you.
Okay, so let me. I think the biggest adversity that I've ever had, at least in my career, was I was your typical geeky software developer, who, by the way, loved agile practices, but I loved the agile stuff mainly because it reduced, I'll call it developer friction, it improved the developer experience. I had a lot of pride in my ability to write good code, to mentor others, but really it was about my technical capability, and I lost the use of my hands.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it was an interesting thing as a chronic pain condition caused by stress and overuse, and basically I went from being great at my job to not being able to do my job at all.
Wow.
So that was, it's kind of like going from hero capability to zero capability kind of type thing. And the good part about it was I had a boss at the time who said, Jeff, you've been on disability for 6 months. I want you to come back to work. And I'm like, I can't use my hands. I can't do anything. And he said, you know what? We never needed you for your programming. We needed you for your brain. It was all the stuff that I did that wasn't programming that he thought was valuable, whether it was mentorship, solutioning, working with others. And so I was like terrified, but you know what? I said, I'm going to go do it. My boss believes in me. I'm going to do it. And then when I came back, not only was I the software guy who couldn't use his hands, all the software projects had died up. So I was asked to go help with stuff I knew nothing about, like go be an infrastructure advisory expert, or go help with performance tuning, or just, I don't know, go do some overall technology strategy. This is for a big consulting firm. So I was asked to work in domains I didn't have a lot of experience with. I couldn't use my hands to the point where I couldn't even really send emails well. I had to use voice recognition. So this is like funny. And so I felt like a blind art critic. And the opportunity that happened was when you work for a big consultancy, I was working for a big consultancy, Deloitte at the time, there's always young, fresh talent that wants to learn stuff. And the level of passion and enthusiasm you get from young, smart people is it's indescribable. And I was forced to spend all my time teaching other people how to do stuff and how to mentor them. And that was not my first, like if someone said, oh, Jeff, you're such a great mentor, I'd be like, no, that's not my first thing to do. But that's basically how I had to do it to survive. And the level of capability growth when you latch onto the right talents and you give them the right platform, and by platform I mean like good, cool content that's like young people understand, like why ITIL is annoying and the Rational Unified, all these old processes are bloated and they innately don't like it. but then you give them an opportunity canvas, or you say, hey, we're going to go do some validated learning, or we're going to all the other things. We're going to go and teach people how to design in short iterations, and they intrinsically think it's cool, and they like it, and they learn it, and all of a sudden you've got a little army of folks who are trying to kind of change things. So that was the big lost my hands. And oh, by the way, just as I was maturing from a developer to thinking about teams and programs and products, Agile was maturing.
Mm-hmm.
And sticky note based planning and story mapping and journey mapping, all that stuff started happening. And I couldn't use my hand; I used my computer. But I could use sticky notes and I could write on sticky notes. So all of a sudden, all that stuff became the only way I could operate. And it turned out to be a really good way to operate anyway. So it was kind of like a blessing in disguise. It forced me out of being a developer into something else.
So you went from being a developer, you got successful, and then you couldn't be a developer anymore. So you were exploring different things, but you had someone who believed in you and gave you the opportunity, try out things, and then you
Right.
saw that you could inspire the others, mentor the others.
That's right. Well, that was the only way I could be successful.
Yeah. And how did you feel when you realized you couldn't be a developer anymore?
Oh, that's terrifying. You know, felt like I lost a sense, basically. You know,
Hmm.
um, then what was interesting is started learning about things like um, class responsibility collaborator cards and
Hmm.
story mapping and Kanban systems where you have visual flow. And so I started realizing that you could take this systems thinking kind of approach and take it out of what is primarily a very solitary activity and bring it into a co-creation style of activity. Um, so I think going from fear of being able to do lone or siloed work was
Hmm.
replaced by joy of being able to do co-creative work, which is much more compelling anyway, much more
Yeah,
interesting.
that's really an interesting story. And then from there, you were still working for a company and so on, but eventually you decided to start your own thing. How did that come to happen?
Well, I was working for Deloitte, and I've outlined some of the great things about working with Deloitte. Some of the issues of working with Deloitte is it's a big consultancy, and you can get a lot of leaders that don't believe in this new model and are quite cynical about it. So I was always having issues with people, and eventually I got fired. So it
Oh.
wasn't my choice. Yeah, I was fired. Uh, I was at the center of a bunch of controversy. Um, uh, I helped stand up a wiki on unsanctioned infrastructure. That was still the company had bought another company, and they had a bunch of infrastructure, and I put a wiki on it, and we were getting all this collaboration, and then Deloitte Security found out about it, and so that was big X number one. And then I was out ahead of it doesn't matter ahead of another proposal that went sideways, and they asked me to leave.
Oh.
And I had a big smile on my face when they did that, actually, to be honest, because I had been working with some pretty toxic leaders at the time,
Hmm.
and uh, what this did was give me by firing me they gave me a severance and it was quite generous and all that kind of good stuff is gave me the time I needed um, to just start seeing what I could do on my own because I knew that I had a good platform. I was lucky enough to be doing sort of agile related changes as early as 2005,
Hmm.
and at that point agile was not quite popular yet. It was popular-ish, but you couldn't say the word agile in a big bank in Canada. They would
Oh.
not like all the executives hated the word agile. You couldn't say you couldn't have a, it was something you couldn't say with the grown-ups in 2005.
Hmm.
But I
Hmm.
was still managing to find big bank clients, government, public sector, who were willing. They called it lean, but then we would just do agile under the covers, and we'd say, "Yeah, it's our lean transformation." And I was getting a lot of experience of what not to do when you're trying to do these kinds of changes. I made every mistake you could make when it comes to trying to help an organization do agile. Being part of a large consultancy, I did it the big consulting way you could imagine. and then like scraped my knees on the ground a million times and really learned how not to do it. So I felt really comfortable once they let me go that I could be on my own. I was pretty happy, actually, to be honest.
Really interesting. So you got fired, you didn't panic. You said, now I have time, I'm gonna figure this out. So you had a lot of learnings of what not to do. So you want to implement things differently. I got curious about the what not to do because this is one of the things I talk the most. And I'm curious from you,
Yeah.
like if you say like, what is the one thing you learn? Like many people make that mistake, but you should just not do it.
Um, Probably the biggest one, which is the funniest one, is don't do an agile transformation. And I'm going to steal this from Jonathan Smart, who's just an awesome guy. Uh, um, but um, I say it a little bit differently, which is agile is not the outcome. What is the outcome? And the outcome should be a mixture of what are the things you want to do as a business this year, and then qualitatively, how do you want to do them differently? You know, how do you want to have it with less delay, with more teamwork, with more learning? But really, what are those business outcomes is a huge one. Um, the other one is no one size fits all. Stop with the agile methodology train kind of coming out and thou shalt do story points and thy story points must be normalized and just all this sort of standardized process bloat. So let's not do that. Um, uh, Stop starting with the team. It's not a team thing. If you do all the things around it, then the teams will happen. And I usually find the teams, the people on the ground are the ones that have the easiest time getting to a new mindset and a new approach, but they're faced with all these awful impediments to just get in the way. Um, uh, it's interesting. Like even a lot of the work that Agile by Design does now, we come in because a bigger consultancy was already
Hmm.
there. It's just the nature of big enterprise. We're a boutique of around. We're big for an agile company. There's about 30 of us, but we're still a pipsqueak when it comes to all. If you look at all the agile transformations, I use agile transformations in quotes. The vast majority of them are done by McKinsey, Deloitte, E&Y, Accenture, huge organizations. And I'm lucky enough to have some good relationships with some partners where we get into these transformations, but they almost always start with uh, faster, better, cheaper is the outcome, which is the wrong thing. We're going to stand up 12 agile labs in 4 months, 12 agile teams in 4 months. We've figured out the SDLC, the software development lifecycle for the teams, but not how anything else is going to work. And everyone has to do it the same way. And what we have to do is we have to end up going in um, and reframing the plan as a set of experiments. So the lean change method, which is one of my books, is nothing fancy. It's just saying if you're in a change initiative on a change team, you're a startup. And everything that you've got in front of you is an assumption, and your market that you want to test against is the organization. And your plan is going to be wrong, your change is going to be wrong, and you need to test and learn your way through it. So we start getting credibility by framing all of the stuff that has been put in front of us, the 100 pages of PowerPoint made by the consultants, and start framing them as assumptions. And then what we do is start validating. Unfortunately, it's more invalidating than validating those assumptions, and start slowly weaning our way back onto a different track. But it's never pure, and because there's a lot of talk about how to do it correctly, but not a lot of talk of the reality is more often than not, it still starts incorrectly, and you have to kind of recover. And so we do a lot of that kind of recovery, basically.
It's quite powerful what you said, and especially one thing that stuck with me is agile is not a team thing; it is beyond the team. And if the other things beyond the team happen, the teams will happen. And most of the times, whenever I hear agile transformation or we do agile by the book, and I say, "Oh, that's
Yeah.
already where I get scared." Agile by the book, how do you do that? Or we follow the Bible of Scrum. So, oh, dangerous.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. And when it comes to the consultancy, they do a few things quite well. They do beautiful infographics and that everyone can understand everything in one page, at least they think so. But it's very focused on the team. So
Yeah,
everything is about the team. How do you get things shipped? But nobody is talking how do we define what we should work on, who is involved, and all of the things that actually will just impede Agile from delivering what it's supposed to deliver. And one of the
absolutely.
things you mentioned, assumption, we want to validate the assumption so we can continue with whatever we want to do. But if we are validating most of the assumptions, it means that we are just doing waterfalls because the truth is we don't know what we don't know. So when we
Right.
hit reality, we will invalidate many things.
I mean, it's interesting. You raise a point that I don't think is explicit for a lot of people in this business, which is there are a lot of things that are hard to do from a behavior aspect at the leadership level, but not really that complex to do from a structure, um, that are more important than standing up teams at first. Um, Gil Broza actually talks about this in his latest book, which is de-stressing the system.
Mm,
So before you talk about agile and before you, and if I reflect on all of about half my clients follow the advice and half my clients don't, being very transparent. And the ones that have been really successful have always looked at their backlog at the portfolio level, like the whole organization, and said, we have 5 times too many projects in the backlog. And they reduce it usually by a factor of 5. I swear I'm not making this number up. One organization I was at had around 80 employees in their line of business and 120 projects on the go. And each of these projects required 10 people at 50%. It's just insane. And that client was awesome. What she did is she went to every business user and said, what's coming? It's coming down to 15, and brought it down to 15 and kind of de-stress the system so that you can see everything. And what quickly happened after that is, well, what are our outcomes? What are the objectives? What are the missions that are important to us? And getting to a much smaller amount of them. And then how do we validate those things? Those are all things that can happen without standing up. By the way, I love agile teams. So I'm a big fan of agile teams, cross-functional, autonomous. But even before all that happens, you can visualize what's going on and lower the water levels and then start asking really powerful questions. And once you start doing that, then you can start saying, okay, now we have some teams worth standing up.
yeah, for sure. Because the teams, as you mentioned before, they are not resistant to do agile. They are open to explore whatever framework you want to use. If you say, let's try shape up, let's try scrum, the teams will be open to that because they
Yeah,
want to
absolutely.
experience. But if you have 80 people and 100 plus project, it doesn't matter the way you are trying to improve things. It is just not going to work. You start with confusion. And that was one of the reasons that I adapted the roadmap now next later from Yana Bastov,
Yeah,
because I said, like, we need to actually mindfully add something to the trash. Because I
yeah,
noticed that most of the teams, when they say the word later, they love the word later. They're going to put everything into later, but we keep discussing that. Oh, no, that's for later. That's for later. But it's very important to make decisions on what we are just not going to do it. So we can focus on what we are committed to.
and a lot of I'm going. I want to keep this anonymous to protect the guilty or the innocent. But one of my clients right now is going through this, where we've got this sort of mandate to stand up a whole lot of these teams, um, but there's no sense of how much demand is in the pipeline versus what can get done. And even if you do it in a really coarse-grained way, at least what I've seen so far is usually it's not like they've got 50% more work or 70% more work than they can consume. It's 3 times, 5 times, 7 times. It's not even close. So it's completely unmanaged and just doing a little bit of that discipline of throwing stuff in the trash. It's one of those things, very simple to do actually, but the buy-in and the willingness to do it, it's not there necessarily. And so having those tough conversations to say, well, maybe you guys do this first, and then we'll stand up a whole bunch of teams.
Yeah,
Makes a lot more sense.
that's true. And one of the signs I noticed, probably you could share something related to it. When the organization is trying to do agile and it stresses you referred to, what happens quite often is when you attend to any meeting or any exchange, you'll notice that many people talk about the work. There's a lot of conversation about the work that we will be doing, the work that is
Yeah.
necessary, and everyone is talking about this thing called the work, but only a few people have the time to do the work because they have too many conversations about everything that everyone wants to do. And when it comes to let's get things done, it is hard to find the time.
You actually said this in your LinkedIn Live where you said, don't coordinate, collaborate.
Yeah.
And that's a mic drop moment as far as I'm concerned. One of the things that I try to help people with is to set up systems of collaboration. So managers stop talking about it from a coordinating perspective and roll up their sleeves and do the work with the actual teams. So it becomes easier to say, well, this is the kind of team and the support people that are doing it. You don't come in to talk about it. You come in to actually co-create. The one good thing about Agile, and by the way, I use Agile kind of like, the Agile verse. It's kind of like the Spider Verse. It's like there's lots of Agile variants, and I put design thinking in there, and lean startup, and Agile product development, and DevOps, and whatever. All belongs in that universe. And one of the good things about that universe is there's so many collaborative tools you can use that are like, I'll call them semi-structured, but highly collaborative. So you don't need to manage the work so much as you need a leader doesn't have to manage the work so much as get in there, start putting some structure around what we're trying to get to, put some constraints around it, and then get out of the way and let the team finish it.
Hmm.
There's lots of opportunities to come in without instruction and just co-create with people. And that's the big skill that we're trying to get positional management out of is stop managing. You don't need to, you don't need to coordinate everybody's work all the time. You need to actually show up and show people how to collaborate with each other.
Yeah, and it's very related to my best definition of leadership comes from Simon Sinek. It is something between the
Yeah.
lines. I love that because it is about creating the space where the ideas can happen. It is not about coming up with the ideas, but creating the space. And for me, that relates a lot to make collaboration natural, something that can happen. Because if you make collaboration optional, then silos will be all over the place, then people will be coordinating work and they will struggle. That's what's going to happen. But one thing that is in our way right now, and many people are freaking out, it is the AI. So what is going to happen?
Yeah.
What is the future? So how do you perceive AI impacting on the daily business of creating products and working? How do you see that?
So I'm far from the AI expert, but one thing that I do see that is an obvious use case, especially for I'm going to call any team that uses a combination of agile mindset and practices an agile powered team. So or an agile team for short. So most agile teams struggle because they don't have enough skill sets or perception is they don't have the skills required for end-to-end autonomy.
Hmm.
So, if you want to go and let's just take a digital team as an example, they need to know everything about digital. They need to know about marketing for the channel. They need to know the back office systems they're integrating with. They need to understand security and privacy. There's legal terms and conditions. There's a whole lot of things that you cannot ever put full time onto that team. It would be a team of 50. So that leaves you with having a set of enablers, kind of like a set of support functions. No different than a hockey team, has a coach and has physiotherapists and have all these support functions that help the team play the game. You have these enablement groups. But the reality is that it can take a long time for a team to create an effective engagement model with these enablers, whether it's DevOps or governance or HR or there's a million enablement functions they need to work with to get the right level of autonomy that we want them to have. What I've been experimenting with is, what if those enablers spent more time creating AI and providing their services using AI, so that I don't have to go to the security privacy expert every time I have a question and I want to deploy something. I can go to the AI that's being monitored by somebody else, and I can, it won't be 100% correct, but it's better than zero, and it scales. So I think everyone's worried about AI causing them to lose their jobs. What I would encourage people to think about is AI helps you be a generalizing specialist. You need enough specialization to ask good questions, but you can now be a generalist in a whole lot of other areas to get the reasonable advice for 90% of the situation. I think it's going to create a lot more of an ability to actually have autonomous teams than we've got right
Mhm.
now.
No, that's interesting because I don't think also AI is gonna replace good agile people, product people, and so on,
I
because
don't think so.
there's a lot of sense, and this we don't even know how we act sometimes. We have a sense and we
Yeah,
go there, we say, this is a fire I should take care of, and this is something now I'm going to ignore. So comes with experience and developing the sense and so on. But AI can help with scalability on the other aspects, which is generally a
absolutely.
struggle, legal aspects and all of this. It is for sure that teams won't have all the skills. But if they know the questions to ask, then AI can help them.
Like I have an example where a digital team is trying to say, this is a new product change. Are the terms and conditions correct? And the amount of churn between the team and the lawyer around the right T's and C's, if you get a senior lawyer, it's fine because they know not to be too strict and to trust the product owner. But I had this one example where the team was working with lawyers who were junior, and
Uh-huh.
junior lawyers want to find stuff. They want to find problems because, hey, I found more problems. I'm doing my job, and just slowing the team down. And so that ability to just, get the basic knowledge onto the team, and then only raise the flag, something up the flagpole if it's exceptional, just goes up. I talked about how I used to love being a developer. So
Hmm.
now I am a developer again on the side, a couple hours a day, not a lot, but just for fun. AI is allowing me to do that because I can say, how do I do this in Python? And it's reasonably correct, but the higher level design is terrible. The mistakes are silly, and the sense making of how to bring it together is missing. So I don't think the job of software delivery goes away because we have AI. You just have more people able to bootstrap themselves on the skill. And I think the same thing will go with anything else.
Yeah, that's interesting. And when you talk about the team, for you, what are the traits you see in a successful team?
That's a good one. First of all, and this is a bit of an open-ended answer. They have a well understood level of autonomy. They understand what they're trying to achieve and how much permission they have to achieve it. A lot of people say, you have to go from waterfall traditional to self-organizing team, and then it's like it's crazy. The team can do whatever. Either the team has no autonomy because they're still scared of all the electric invisible fences. I don't know if you've ever heard of the electric invisible
Yeah.
fences. The idea is, you're walking through and you do something, you get shocked because someone says, "No, you can't do that," but it's not written down anywhere. So lots of electric invisible fences, or the team just goes crazy in a different direction and sinks a part of the business without any feedback and any constraints. So understanding the outcome and what is the level of autonomy the team has right now, and what's the path to greater autonomy, is
Mhm.
something I don't see enough teams or organizations take the time to even have the conversation. You can have various tools. You could use Jürgen Apollo's delegation poker. You could use David Marquette's levels of leadership. It doesn't matter what tool you use, but have the conversation around, like, you've got this outcome. You only have partial permission. No one has full, complete permission in the real world. And the team is allowed to say, okay, well, we only have this much permission. We want this much permission, and here's how we're going to earn that permission, get that credibility, increase our skills. So that's one kind of big thing to do. And the other one, which I don't see a lot of teams do, is we're an agile team. We have no connection with our customer. A lot of agile teams have no path to the customer. So then the coaches complain and the executives give an excuse and nothing happens. So don't go from no connection to complete connection. What is your current path? And draw a map that says, oh, I got to talk to the head of research, who talks to the head of the customer relationship group, who talks to the head of the geography. Okay, can we come with you? Can we navigate, draw the path and navigate the path and start removing the obstacles systematically?
Mhm.
I could go on with, by the way, with this answer
Sure,
forever, so I'm
sure.
going to
I,
pause.
I like. I was just reflecting on this one because when you mentioned the path, because many people say, yeah, the customer relationship is with sales, and sales won't
Yeah,
let us. But what they don't try to do is looking into the path. It is like it's something binary. It's 0 or
right,
1. So that doesn't
exactly.
work. So how do we move from 0 to 1 then? And for sure, it's not going to be from one day to the other. I like the word path here. It is an interesting perspective.
It's actually more of a map because you have customer support, you've got sales, you've got head of product, you've got sometimes in B2B account owners or account reps, and they're all touching different parts of the customer. And so you have to understand each of those people and their impact to the customer and start working with them and then start moving upstream, basically.
Hmm. And I'll coming to the end here. I have one more question for you. What
Yeah.
is something that is generally overlooked when it comes to agile?
I'm going to give one that is maybe it's starting to change, but Agile puts a lot of emphasis on the team as a concrete, solid, stable thing where it takes time for people to form and storm and it's got to be stable. I don't disagree with that, but I've seen a whole lot of Agile transformations result in a silo of Agile teams.
Hmm.
What people don't look often overlook is it's not about teams, it's teamwork. And a team is a safe space for teamwork to thrive. But if a whole lot of new, imagine the market changes,
Yeah.
or the channel changes, or the outcome changes. If you're organized for yesterday's outcomes, then the outcome is gonna diffuse across a whole bunch of teams. Those aren't the teams doing the work anymore. The teams doing the work are this other shadow entity that's operating. So what I try to tell people to do is, as best you can, with safety and not command and control, you have to reform around the outcomes, and you have to create an environment of teamwork where it's easier to reform around outcomes, and not get into this. Well, I'm in my agile team, and you're in your agile team. Like the team is only as temporary or only as permanent as the outcomes are. And if things are changing, you have to be able to reform into new teams. And how do you create that environment of safety so that people can reform into new teams effectively and really eliminate all the bureaucracy and handoff that gets in the way of actually working together?
I would say I've seen that quite often, and it's true. There's a kind of a defense mechanism. This is my
Yeah,
team, and we are responsible for that. And then it turns out that the team starts searching for work for their responsibility, even though their
right.
responsibility may have become obsolete. And yet,
Doesn't matter anymore. Right.
exactly, I was part of an e-commerce once, and we had a product information management system, and in this case, it was working well. Nobody needed anything there, but the team was responsible for this, and the team didn't have anything to do. They decided, okay, let's change the programming language. Let's do something in a fancier one.
Yeah. And you're like,
That was the choice. And then I asked, like, how does this help us with customer retention? That is our current challenge right now. I said, well, it doesn't, but that's not my problem. My team doesn't take care of that.
yeah. This idea of, I think it's starting to become more in vogue, is you have to organize around the outcomes. And if the outcomes doesn't match the structure, then let's all shift the structure. But definitely a new, uh, it's relatively new because people are starting to realize that there's no such thing as a perfect agile team model, especially
Yeah,
if you want to actually be responsive to what you need to do.
that's for sure. And for those watching here or listening, what would be the final thoughts you want to leave it for them?
How can you, challenge yourself to set up an environment of teamwork in a very personal way? If you're a leader of an organization, don't think of this new way of working as how's my entire organization going to change. Think about your team and that those personal sets of relationships and collaborations that you can engage in. Um, uh, uh, and how can you make a change at your level, basically?
Make a change to your level. That's a very good advice. Thanks for that. So, Jeff, how can people best connect with you?
Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Jeff Anderson, or go to agilebydesign.com and you can connect with me directly there as well.
Perfect. I will leave all the links so people find it easily. It's been a pleasure. A lot of knowledge in our conversation here. So, thanks. So, for everyone watching, just get the book. There's the Lean method and organizing agility. So, I will share all the links with you here. So, keep in touch. So, let's rock the product world together. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, David.
You.